Good evening, everybody. Hopefully, Ashley, can you take that view down? Okay, hopefully people can hear me. I cannot see myself at the moment on the screen, so that's nothing new for technology. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening for part 2 of Together We Can webinars. This evening, we're going to focus on invisible barriers. The first webinar included more people presented by Jackie, trainer, and you can be rewatched on the British Rowing website. The first webinar considered the value of improving diversity in our clubs. This evening, we're going to be diving deeper into the socio-economic barriers and how we can mitigate some of these challenges. Sorry, the webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it back on the website later. Everybody is in mute, and if you want to ask a question, please use the question box, and I will be looking at those questions as we go through. If there's something that you want to ask and it's not part, or you want to ask it later, please email clubsupport@britishrowing.org, and one of the community support team will pick it up. I'd now like to hand you over to Ash, who will introduce our panelists this evening. Ash, over to you.
Hi everybody, sorry about that. My computer just froze and I'm in control of the webinar, which wasn't very helpful. Can you see me?
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. We can.
Sorry about that. The video didn't like my computer for sure. So I am really pleased to be joined today by a group of panelists from around the regions. We have Kieran Longmore joining us from the Gorse Boat Club, which is in Leeds. Amy McCarthy, who is a Henley Royal Regatta Charitable Trust coach from Sunderland, and Deva Mitra, who is a rowing club. He's a coach from the Lee Rowing Club, which is in East London. I'd like to mention that our panelists tonight might not necessarily be experts in their field with engaging with low income groups, but they are all on a journey and champions in their clubs. And as a sport, I feel like we're beefing up the journey we're on in relation to reaching out to different groups, which is why I'm pleased to be able to discuss their experiences and highlight some of the challenges that they've had to consider in their programs. Before we get going, I'd like to consider why we're focusing on socioeconomic barriers this evening. I think that most people who are tuned in will have an understanding that as a sport, we have a perceived image problem. We are known for being a middle class sport with typically a white clientele, which personally I feel is perpetuated every year when you watch the boat race coverage, which is typically viewed on the BBC by around 5 million people. And I found if you talk to non-rowers, particularly if they've just had a go at the sport, they'll often tell you about how they used to think that the sport was for big, tall, posh white men, which we know that isn't the case, or it shouldn't be the case. But I think it's quite important that it's part of the landscape that we need to consider when we're reaching out to include more people in the sport. So we also know that socioeconomic inequalities in sport are more than just perceptions, as the makeup of the British Rowing membership also highlights this issue. The Inclusive Club Guide, which was published in 2018, found that a large proportion of British Rowing members are drawn from higher income, education and employment groups. So it found that 48% of members have an average household income which is over £40,000 annually, which compares to a national average of £27,000. And so you can read more into the statistics and some of the other tools that are available in the Inclusive Club Guide. If you search that into Google, it's the first thing that will come up, which I would encourage you to do so if you haven't explored that before. So this phenomenon isn't just limited to rowing, unfortunately. It's also seen in wider sport. So the latest Sport England Active Live survey found that people in lower socioeconomic groups are the most likely economic group to be inactive. And they found that a third of the adult population in England, which is about 12 million people, are from lower socioeconomic groups. So there's quite a lot to be done for all sports, but particularly also in rowing, because we're aware that there's more we need to do here. Now, what I think we'd like to do is talk to our panelists now, get them to introduce themselves and just say a little bit about where they're from and what they do in their clubs. So Kieran, actually, should everyone turn their webcams on? Say hello. And can we start with Kieran and go through a little bit of what Gorse is about and who you are for people who might not have heard of you before?
Yeah, so hello everyone. It's good to speak to you this evening. As Ash has already said, my name is Kieran and I'm from the Gorse Boat Club, which is a rowing programme in Leeds. Now, the Gorse Boat Club is for the pupils of the Gorse Academy Trust. The trust is made up of 5 secondary academies and 1 sixth form college. And the trust's main aim is to challenge the stubborn link between poverty and academic underperformance. So with that in mind, how does rowing play a part in this? I can say I was a junior rower, and anecdotally I can say that rowing as a junior taught me to love sport and staying active, but it also taught me lots of other soft skills like teamwork, tenacity and time management. Now, when these skills are transferred into the classroom and eventually the workplace, the hope is, or my hope would be, that this makes them into better performing individuals, whether this is academically or just with the amount of work they can get done. Luckily, the trust I work for acknowledges the role of sport in the holistic development of a young person, just like I do. So alongside the rowing programme, they run a high performance karate programme and a volleyball programme. So the rowing programme at Gorse began in 2016. It's an ambitious programme. We want to do well at competitions, but we also want to do right by the individual. So we want to be fostering those kind of skills that I've mentioned earlier, but we don't want them to burn out. We want them to carry on with the sport, whether that's in high performance university programs or that the things we have taught them have allowed them to engage in sport for life. The programme can be split into 3 main strands. The first is indoor rowing, taught in curriculum P lessons. So throughout year 7, 8 and 9, every pupil in our 5 secondaries is taught a 6 to 8 week block, so a half-term block of indoor rowing, and that's by PE staff. In that, they learn what a rowing machine is, the correct sequence, and they begin to learn how they can row faster and more powerfully. The second strand of the programme is in extracurricular clubs. So we run 2 indoor rowing clubs in each of our trust academies, and they are run by PE staff again. But the key part of that is the pupils who enjoy indoor rowing or are good at indoor rowing are signposted to go to those clubs. And at that club, they learn the more competitive side of indoor rowing as they prepare for either intra-trust competition, local competition around Leeds, or national indoor competitions. And the final part of the programme is the on-water programme. So I kind of look at or look over those first two parts. They follow a scheme of work that I've written in PE, and I support the indoor clubs. But the main bulk of my job is to coach on the water. Now, there's another coach, Abby, and we row out of the Leeds Boathouse. The on-water programme begins in year 8. How we select pupils is we're looking to select 15 to 30 pupils who have shown skill in their PE lessons and skill in the extracurricular indoor club. And that programme, on-water programme, runs all the way through into our sixth form college. So from year 8 all the way to year 13. Now, I've been asked this evening to speak about invisible barriers. We encounter quite a few barriers in the programme, and we work towards trying to fix them. As Ash mentioned, I don't want to be seen as this oracle or expert, but we are a different programme, as in there's not many programmes like us because of the schools we work in, and therefore we do encounter, I would say, a few more barriers than your average rowing programme. Now, some of them are more visible than others, and some of them, when you actually think about them, are more surprising than others. So an example of a couple of them was when I first came to the job 2 years ago, I was so surprised about the number of kids who cannot swim in a year group. Now that's a huge barrier to rowing. Why would you want to get in a boat on the water if you cannot swim? And how are we looking to address that? We're working hard to get all pupils in our trust primary schools to swimming lessons all the way through year 4, so we've addressed that. And we're also looking at picking up, maybe some people have slipped through the net, so they're now getting one-to-one swimming tuition. Now, an example of a less visible barrier is I had one kid, we do sessions on a morning before school, and every morning, as much as he loved rowing, he was late. And when you questioned him and said, why do you keep coming late? Like, what's going on? He said, well, I haven't got an alarm clock. And when you're waking up to be at school at 7 o'clock, it's a lot more difficult to get up without an alarm clock or without a mobile phone to wake you up. So the solution to that invisible barrier was, well, I just bought him an alarm clock. So there's some examples of invisible barriers just to get the conversation started. But the main way I'm challenging an invisible barrier or a visible barrier is our programme is, I would say, very cheap. Pupils on the programme have to pay for 2 things. The first is a British Rowing membership, and the second is any kit they wish to wear. So that's all-in-one t-shirts. Now, every other cost is covered by the trust. So that's a membership to the club, race fees, travel to the boathouse after school and back to school, and travel to races. How are we able to do that? I'm lucky in a sense that 4 of our 5 academies in the trust have a higher than national average percentage of pupil premium students. Now, pupil premium is extra funding for government. It's extra funding for publicly funded schools, and the premium is there to improve the attainment of disadvantaged pupils. Now, as I mentioned already, the trust has already recognised the importance of sport and therefore chooses to use some of the pupil premium it gets to invest in the high performance sports programs. So that's volleyball, karate and rowing. And because of the proportion of pupil premium money we are getting, we can be creative with how we spend it, and the rowing program is a great example of that. Other ways that I'm able to make the program as cheap as possible is that we stretch the pound. We hire boats and equipment from Leeds Rowing Club for an incredibly reasonable price, and I'm indebted to the people in charge of Leeds Rowing Club that they are so good to us. And it's at the head of Leeds Rowing Club is two very kind men, and their comment often to me is they don't want to see their boat sat on the rack during the day going unused. And perhaps for some people watching this evening, is that something you can consider in your club? Have you got equipment that lies dormant for the majority of the time? And could you engage with outside agencies or schools like us and work on how you could include them in your club? The second way we stretch the pound is we are beginning to have an economy of scale. I did count once. We've got under 5,000 pupils in each of our secondary academies and sixth form colleges. So I can now, rather than buying 20 t-shirts for kids, I'm buying 150 t-shirts for all our New Year 8s, and little things like that are beginning to make stuff much cheaper. When we go away to a race, I'm buying trays of fruit to supplement the lunch boxes they have, rather than just fruit from the supermarket. Another thing we're doing to stretch the pound is we're working very hard to fix this session coach issue. A lot of programs across the country are propped up by session coaches. Now, session coaches are a really expensive way to run a rowing program. So we have strong relationships with Leeds University, and a handful of their members actively volunteer in our schools or with our own water program. And the other thing we're trying to do is enroll trainee teachers from a rowing background. The Trust runs a school-centered initial teacher training program, and these trainees do a bit of time learning in a central place, and then they spend half their week in their schools. Now, our hope is that if we're recruiting trainee teachers from a rowing background, they might want to engage in our program and help with some of the coaching. And kind of a long-term goal with that is that they will, they might get a timetable where it's part-time rowing work and part-time teaching work. So we're planning for the future. Another way we stretch the pound, my penultimate point, is match racing. I'm very grateful to other people in the rowing community up here in Yorkshire. Grateful to Ian, who runs the program at St. Peter's, and Andy, who runs the program at Yarm, for allowing us to race their athletes. Maybe a visible or invisible barrier. Match racing, firstly, is much cheaper for me because I don't have to pay race fees. Then invisible barriers to that is if we go off match racing, I've provided a racing opportunity, but I can get all my racing done within a morning. So I'm not having to pay the caretaker who drives the bus for us a little more money. And I'm also not having to worry about providing lunches for some of our pupil premium kids. And then another point to that is when we match race, we don't have to have every kid in uniform kit and in all our Gorse kit, so that they're not having to fork out for an all-in-one, or me as a program and not having to fork out to own 50 all-in-ones, that they kind of just turn up and race. So there's a few visible or invisible barriers there. And then the final point I really want to make is the majority of our rowing takes place on indoor machines. Now, I harp on about this all the time. Indoor rowing is a sport, and maybe to challenge some ideas, it's a better sport than on-water rowing, especially for introducing the sport to people from deprived backgrounds. It's a sport that's easy. They can do indoor rowing on a machine once the school has bought a machine. They never get rained on, it's never windy, and it's seldom miserable. So it shouldn't be seen as something you just do in the winter and long, long miles. It can be seen as a sport, and it can be seen as something different. And we challenge that by, we have lots of fun on our indoor machines, the Club for All, which is for all year groups. We play some funner games, we do a bit of technique, and then everyone races a 2-minute and everyone races a relay, which they all really enjoy. And again, another note to people listening is your club could do this, whether it's on a large scale like a schools program like us, or helping out with school games. Rowing, indoor rowing is part of the school game structure now, and the rowing club or your rowing club could provide the machines for that. Or if you want to scale down again, you could go out into the community and do a 100-meter race at a local village fete or anything like that. And I would say the hardest part of that is just working out how to put lots of machines in a car. Like, it is very, very easy to put a machine out there and just get people on it. And you've introduced the sport to new people. You've maybe planted the seed that they'll then become members of your club. But indoor rowing is easy. But ultimately, we can try and make it as cheap as possible, and we can try and stretch the pounds. But rowing is an expensive sport. I'm lucky that the trust has pupil premium, but we can't do it without extra funding. So we do apply for funding from charities or grants, and we do get some of the money, which helps me out massively. Now, when I get extra money, I like to see it as a bit of a bonus, and I would still continue doing things, but when I get a bit of extra money, it makes my life a bit easier. So when I said earlier of teaching people to swim, we were lucky we got just under £1,000 in summer. Now, what has that allowed me to do? I had the money to rent out 2 lanes of a swimming pool to teach people to swim, but now I have the money to provide a 1-to-1 lesson for every pupil who can't swim from year 8 and above. Another example was we have got a lot of money out of the National Lotteries Awards for All, and that money is oh, there we go. It muted me for a while. And so National Lottery Awards for All, this is my final point, and it was ruined by the fact the computer just muted me, was I can do easier things. So racing down south is difficult for me. The cheapest way for us to do it is to wake up very early, drive down in our minibuses, race, and then drive back up. If I get a little bit of extra money, I'm then able to book a youth hostel for us. So I start off with the cheapest option always, and if I get a little bit of extra, then it helps me out.
That's excellent. It's really refreshing to hear there's such an embedded pathway within a state school. It's really enjoyable to hear, to be honest, for me. I think we should go next to Deva, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the project he started this year.
Okay, thank you, Ash. Hello, everyone. Can't see you, but hello. As a background, I'm a coach, and I coach novice women in learning how to row, how to race, but really to how to love, develop the love of rowing, which we all do, and so that's my focus. One of the things that we started this year, in fact, about 5-6 weeks ago, is to look at how we can improve the ethnic diversity of our sport. One of the things that came across from one of the inside inclusive guides that Reassuring did was one fact, which was that less than 5% of our members are from the BAME community, compared to 14% of the population in England and Wales. And as we're an East London club with Walthamstow, Hackney, Haringey, where the percentage of BAME is a lot higher than the 14%, I was sitting there thinking, our club's really white, and we need to think about ways of changing that. So we had a look at the program, and we've created a program which now has been approved by the board of directors and the trustees, by the coaches, the most important group, and also by the members. And they're all behind this project. And one of the things that also triggered this was I was coaching the young people in the London youth programs, in the London Youth Games, and we went to the Docklands for the annual regatta. And it was so exciting to see people of different ethnicities, different genders, different ages, different abilities, disabled, abled, all having a great time and loving competition and loving rowing. And I was thinking, why can't we have this for the adult population? So what we've done is we've started on a journey. So come back in 6 months' time, and I'll either no longer have any more hair left or a big bush of hair. I don't know, but it's just this thing that we're starting off, and it's a very exciting project. Right now, most of you have learn to row classes, maybe those courses, maybe once a year. We do as well, and we tend to do our courses after Henley, before the start of the season, and we charge £180 for 6 weeks course. And I guess a lot of clubs do that. But to us, that was a barrier, because we get people on the towpath coming to us and saying, that looks interesting. Can I come and row? And we go, yeah, you can. Come back in July or August and ask us then. And then by that time, all the enthusiasm's gone, and we're thinking, I wonder why didn't they come back? So one of the things that we've done is we've changed the barriers, and we've reduced the barriers if we can. So let me ask you a question. If you really wanted to do something, did the money side of it stop you? Or did the ability of it fitting into your life and your lifestyle stop you? What stopped you from doing something? And we came back, and this is the working group and the coaches. We all came back and said, really, it's not the cost itself that's the important thing. Maybe it's the affordability, in the sense, do I really need this whole thing for that much money? Can I do a small part of it for a lot less? Or can I do a small part of it so that it fits in with what I'm doing now? Because I have got 3 weeks available now. Can I do it in 3 weeks? And so on and so on. So one of the things that we did was to change the design of these courses. So we've come up with some bite-sized experience and bite-sized skill courses. Instead of having one monolithic learn to row, 6 weeks, 180 quid, we have now split that down into various groups. So, for example, we're looking at experience sessions of open days, which will be free of charge. You turn up online, or you book online, you turn up, you experience rowing in a limited way. Or if you like it, you can then go into taster sessions. So there'll be more intensive, maybe, and we've just done one this weekend to test our first one out. It was so exciting. You know, we put people onto ergos for maybe 30 minutes, get them to learn how to row, and then put them out into boats, into crewed boats. You know, and we make a small charge for that. Again, it's just a cost. These things cost money, as we all know, and this just as a contribution to funds. And if they like it, they can then go and try different kinds of skills. So, for example, a basic learn to row, 4 weeks, 4 people. It'll cost about 60 quid rather than the 180, and you can run that on schedule basis, or you get 4 mates together and say, let's go and learn to row, and you can come and do that, right? And that, from our cost calculation, just about breaks even. You just have to sneeze and you make a loss, but there you go. Once you're happy with that basic learn to row course and you want to go and do something more, and also work out a path to join the club, you can then go and do an intermediate rowing class. Okay, again, that costs a bit more and so on. But the thing that we are very excited about, and we don't know how to handle it really, we're quite scared about it, is ad hoc rowing. So we'll just say every fortnight between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in spring, summer, autumn, we will have a drop-in session where you just drop in and row and learn to row. And you just bring a fiver, pay on the door, or pay somebody, and learn to row. So that's something that a lot of people have gone, that sounds rather interesting. Yeah, we would like to try that out. So that's something we want to play with and learn how to implement. So the key question in all this that's going through our minds is, the world revolves around money. How do we fund these initiatives? How do we say, yeah, you are rich enough to afford it, so we can't help you, but oh no, you're not, so we can help you. And there's that stigma and this barrier in doing that in itself. So for us, we're thinking of money should not be a barrier. That's a big statement to make. How do we handle that? How do we handle that someone can come along and do the taster sessions for free and the open days for free? How do we fund it? So, like most clubs, we don't have much money. We have a great number of people who are great volunteers, coaches who are great volunteers, who are very willing to give their time to the club. And so those experience courses can be done at very low cost, and therefore not have that difficulty in saying to somebody, yeah, you've got to come, but then you've got to pay for it. Right? So again, within the community, we can then create the need, like for example, as Kieran said, take some ergos up to an estate or a venue, get people excited about it, come into the open days, come into the taster sessions, and if they then like it, we can start looking at courses. We've also started to look at how do we get customers, members, to pay by installments. Right? The reason I say customers, again, just digressing, I mean, we all know that rowing is a shouty sport. And I just wonder, all the people who can come and join our clubs and join our sessions, do they like being shouted at from the bank by somebody else? I don't know. So, sorry, I just diverted. Anyway, moving on. So we're thinking of allowing members to pay in installments. That to us is an important thing. We have spoken to our contacts in councils, and the message is the same. There's no money, but if we have got programs, they can help us with that. Or there's small amounts of money, small pockets of money lying around that if we change our courses, might be able to access those pots of money. So again, we're looking at all those areas. Last but not least, really, some of you may know of a lady called Sally Lawrence. She passed, unfortunately, sadly, she passed away earlier this year. And so we in the membership have set up a fund in her name. And club members and those who've known her in the rowing community have all contributed to this fund. And the fund, and I'm going to read it here, the fund aims to provide financial support to adults, particularly those who face barriers to challenges with participating in rowing. So again, it's very specific for adults. And so that's one of our options that we have to go and fund experience and skills sessions. And clearly, our journey will also start by contacting organizations like British Rowing, who've got a huge number of sponsors that we can go and talk to. We also have local communities, and we're also toying with some ideas that are completely off the wall, which I can't explain, I can't talk about because I don't know where it's going to end up. But nevertheless, this is all a journey about how do we remove that barrier of costs and making the sport available to a bigger community than we are trying to deal with at the moment. Because again, don't forget, most clubs are looking for athletes, and who knows, there might be huge talent of athletes amongst the communities that we have just left behind or not even engaging with. Yeah. So watch this space. Let's see where we get to. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Deva. It's really good to hear that there are projects going on to support more inclusive recruitment of adults into clubs. I think it's well known that there's a lot more support available for those sorts of programs with kids, but definitely adults is more of a challenge. So it's good that you have considered that and brought that to the table this evening. And also, if anyone listening is thinking about modernising their club offer and they need a way to be able to do that, we do have a system that can help with that. So get in touch with us. I thought I'd plug that for Paul that tells you off later. And I think it would be really good now to go to Amy, who I think has got a few home truths for some coaches out there possibly. So Amy, if you'd like to tell us what you've got to tell us.
Hiya, my name's Amy McCarthy and I'm a second year Henry Royal Regatta Charitable Trust coach at British Rowing, based at City of Sunderland Rowing Club. This role is designed to broaden the appeal of the sport by supporting young people who would not normally have the opportunity to try rowing, including those from varying backgrounds and low socioeconomic areas. This includes working with the host club to build relationships with local schools and partnership developers to provide opportunities for indoor and outdoor rowing. This is in the sense of lunchtime and after school clubs, rowing as part of the curriculum, junior indoor rowing leaders, water sessions at Sunderland Rowing Club and tank sessions at Durham University. That's why it's important to make rowing as accessible as possible to all through every element of the sport. My job role entails delivering free indoor sessions to students in schools from areas of high deprivation who would have never thought about taking up the sport of rowing. The club I'm based in is one of the first clubs I've seen to offer free taster sessions on the water, so there's no financial commitment immediately. Payment plans for athletes' club fees are spread out to support parents on low incomes and ensure there's no financial burden from the sport. Including that, the races attended are local and limited unless participating in a national level event, which tends to only be annually. As a younger athlete from a low-income household, I've experienced the financial hardship of rowing and the barriers that come with it. The problem with a sport like rowing is that it's not as simple as putting a ball to the floor and kicking it. Rowing as a sport hosts expensive provisions, including boats and blades, boat club fees, British Rowing membership fees, race entry fees, boat trailering fees, thermal kit, all-in-ones, numerous accounts of wellies, which are scalded for if you capsize and then you lose them in the river. Not neglecting the travel into more prestigious events, the accommodation fees, all of that in a bundle. They're just highlights of the importance of a parent's economic support and the impact socioeconomic status has on a junior athlete's performance. So current research relating to socioeconomic status as a barrier to sports participation is wholly focused on getting juniors into the sport, but there's not a great deal there about maintaining their participation in rowing or the support required to move into a performance athlete role in the sport. From moving as a participation athlete to a performance athlete, training sessions increase, meaning more transport to the club weekly. Trials for events are often held further afield, meaning more transport, potential accommodation. The costs of camps, and many athletes at the end of that spectrum have their own boats, and there's so much pressure to have the best of the best when you're amongst other performance athletes. Therefore, a massive barrier that needs to be addressed is how we support these up-and-coming athletes as well through the doors and help them stay there. It's important to recognise that the parents carry a lot of financial burden and guilt in building a club parent support structure, and developing a rapport can have such a big impact on keeping the athletes in the sport. If there was any complications in making payments or for the parents seeking additional support, they'd know where to go to. Financial priorities for families from low-income backgrounds rank food and clothing purchasing to be of higher importance before paying to participate in sport. So a large burden is placed on parents, especially single household parents, on transporting kids to and from sessions, weekdays, weekends, taking full days to attend regattas and head races, and recognising the work and the additional cost that goes into developing an athlete from home. Not only is this financial burden placed on the parent, But as the junior develops and gains understanding on the costs associated with the sport and the dependency they have on their parents and carers, many athletes aged 16 plus must consider financial stability whilst balancing academia, personal commitments, sport and pressures, importantly moving from that secondary to tertiary education. Junior athletes in particular from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are known to be more prone to episodes of burnout due to a compilation of factors including relationships, education and university pressures, financial independency, and other interpersonal experiences that may negatively impact performance quality and actually increase their risk of getting a sports injury. Being a teenager from a low-income household poses increased dependency to work and provide family support from a working age, despite other protruding commitments. Earning money becomes a priority, trying to support and maintain everyday household needs. A study by Lerman analysed that 40 to 60% of teenagers within education held a part-time job coinciding with their studies, and 25% of that proportion worked in excess of 20 hours a week. So that's a full-time job and more, reiterating how burnout and sports people from low-income backgrounds, meaning managing multi-dimensional roles from a young age, is so important to consider as a coach. So how should a rowing coach support these athletes during this transitional period? Firstly, try not to penalise for lateness or missed sessions. Just like if you're missing an alarm clock, moving into the later adolescent period where athletes are expected to become more independent, they'll be expected to travel alone and manage GCSEs and A-levels in their commitments. I was in this position myself, and I came from a single parent household and used to have to get 2 buses and a 40-minute walk to our boat club and the same to get home. And as training commitments increased, sessions get longer, they're more frequent. You have to get a job if you want to pay for your public transport and how to get there. I had to make my own teas when I got in because my mum worked night shifts, and I had to do 4.5 A-levels to make sure I got into Durham, which is the university I did my undergraduate at. And in general, it becomes a lonely and slow burnout process, which I wish I'd recognised earlier as an athlete. Unfortunately, I ended up with ligament tears and ruptures that kept me out of participating in the sport again, and thankfully moved into a coaching role helped keep me in the sport. However, this transitional period is when rowing loses a lot of athletes and they drop out. Once understanding an individual's difficulties in time management, if ergo sessions can be done from a gym near their home, let them. Although this may temporarily affect the cohesion of the group, being a support structure for athletes during stressful times enhances their willingness to come back to the sport and moving into university boat clubs and potentially performance sport in later years. Ask yourself as a coach, what sessions can be done from home? Can some ergo sessions be swapped with them going for a bike ride or a run? Do they need to be down at the club when they have an exam that week? Do you penalise your athletes for not attending every session? Can they send you their ergo scores electronically? Although some of these seems common sense, and an expectation on all the athletes to be used as role models to attend every session and give 100% every time is a common theme in clubs, and being there all the time is not a positivist approach to coaching. Although there is a lot of focus on achieving distances, times and distance per stroke in athletes, during peak stress times, strip it back to basics, make sessions technique focused, implement skill sessions and remind the athlete why they fell in love with the sport in the first place. Taking the pressure away from the sport side of things will be a cathartic experience for all athletes across the board, including coaches, which has a significant impact on reducing the risk of burnout. Providing a fun learning environment will support developing the coach-athlete relationship, as the coach will show greater understanding of the athlete's needs, again reducing the risk of dropout or burnout. Could the athlete be trying something new? Could valuable learning be achieved through older athletes coaching younger athletes? Have you ever tried coxing before? If not, let them. Just to conclude my section, there are numerous programmes and projects out there to increase the participation rates in students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, which are becoming more recognised within the regions with the support of the SSPs, the SGOs, the local sporting bodies and the school games indoor rowing competitions. However, clubs begin to recognise the disparities for those from lower income backgrounds in sustaining athlete membership rates from low income households and appreciating those balanced in work, study, sports lifestyles. The importance of taper performance and sport and pressure should be highlighted in athletes' routines and training programmes. Furthermore, national governing bodies should look to sway towards reducing testing and racing commitments over peak examination periods. This would impact the dates and focuses on designated camps to support the reduction in burnout, injuries and dropout within the squads. Thank you.
Thank you, that was great. I personally, when I started organising the discussion this evening, I hadn't personally considered that we need to look further than just the money side of things. And I'm really pleased that you've come on board to tell us it's not all about the costs, but actually we need to look at the support system around kids and adults from low-income backgrounds, because that's a really big thing. Kieran, we discussed before that you do something similar in recruiting rowing teachers into your school to help support that environment.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit, how that helps you guys?
Yeah, so I mentioned in my spiel at the beginning, we are looking to recruit teachers from a rowing background. This can help my session coach problem, but also it can help with that nurturing environment that they might not have at home. So if the maths teacher has come from a rowing background, the lesson might begin or end with, how's the rowing going at the moment? Or did you go and compete here and how did you do? And that can supplement a conversation that's happened at home, or it could be the conversation that's happening and supporting them. And that's something I'm conscious of as a coach, that our role is to nurture them. And through school or juniors, you're nurturing them so they become something. They're on a journey. And it's those conversations and hearing if they have problems, how do we address them, and them feeling like they can address issues with us.
Yeah, thank you. I think it sort of chimes, I feel, with Deborah's point. Does everyone need to be shouted at? Do we just need to be approaching how we design our coaching strategies a bit differently, maybe, to be a bit more inclusive? That's excellent. Amy, would you mind mentioning how you got into coaching when you burnt out of the sport?
Yeah, of course. So I started doing a little bit of coaching as an athlete in my club, but unfortunately it wasn't like the best coaching experience. And then when I went to Durham, I started rowing for the College Boat Club, but then started doing some mentoring with Durham University Boat Club, and the community department within Durham University said, we've got some different rowing sessions, come and help us with these and we'll pay for your level 2, which obviously that was a big barrier for me, was I couldn't afford the level 2. Even in some instances where clubs would say they would part fund it, it's still a big chunk of money. So the university paid for that for me to do different outreach projects, which included blind rowing, ADHD children rowing, and helping with their sculling camps as well. And then that's how I got into the sport. Funny enough, fell into this role from my first junior coach. So he got me into the sport of, well, he put this job role on Facebook and said, you need to apply for this. And that's how I got into the Henley Royal Charitable Trust coach position.
Cool. I had a similar experience as a kid. I was the junior captain and started coaching, and just that bit of experience I had just made me transition to coaching and stay in the sport when I started rowing myself. So I think that's important, that we need to have coaches out in the clubs who can see a little bit wider than just getting boats over the finish line. You know, there's a lot more that kids and adults as well can be doing if we can help support people to stay in the sport. Now, time is moving on. Oh, go on, Karen. And
to expand on that, that's something you want. You want role models who are like the kids, and as we're trying, or like the adults Deborah is coaching, we want to change the landscape of rowing, or we are trying to change the landscape of rowing, and some of that comes from, if someone's ended the rowing journey, guiding them into coaching. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, so to round up, if we're going to send you guys to a new club in a new town that we're about to start, and you can't take the support network you've got now, what's going to be the key thing you're going to take with you to ensure that, I'm going to quote Mikey Lee Dale from Clydesdale Rowing Club, who was in the last Together We Can webinar, who said, we need to ensure that kids from deprived backgrounds don't feel like they're deprived. So the kids or the adults we're working with in this new club, what would you do to make sure they don't feel deprived? Jeff, do you want to go first? What's the key thing you do? You're on mute, by the way. Oh, no, you weren't.
Sorry, who, me?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting question, Ash. What would I take across to this new club? I think it's the love of rowing. I think in one thing that I've learned in all my years is that if you love something, if you enjoy something, you become good at it without trying very hard. And so if you can instill that love of rowing in and the love of maybe not competition, but you know, that moment of when you're on your scull, the sun is rising, there's mist on the water, and you know, the boat is just moving effortlessly, and you think, oh, this is what life's about. And if you can instill that into people who row, I think that to me is what I would want to take across, and being, you know, just genuinely happy for them.
Awesome.
Sorry to cut in, but actually there is a question that's just come into the question box that actually asks that very question. It says, how important is it that junior programs work towards high performance and racing? Is there a value in to simply give the opportunity to exercise regularly on the river, especially for those who don't want to take traditional school sports? And just by what you're saying, just being on the water that day that the mist rises off the water and you paddling along is a great as an opportunity as anybody. You know, it's lovely to be out there to watch the sunrise. Yeah. Maybe probably be better to watch the sunset rather than the sunrise. But yeah.
Amy, what are you going to say?
Kieran, with the juniors, is it important that there is a high performance program, or is it more important just to give them that opportunity to get out there?
Well, I would say, pick up a little from what Amy said. She said, at the point of burnout, remind them why they fell in love with rowing. Now, I would change that and say, you are always trying to get them to fall in love with rowing. They are constantly falling in love. And that's the idea of a good junior program, that it builds up, and then they stay engaged in the sport as adults. Now, to answer that question, is high performance important? I would say part of that journey of falling in love is that you work on different things as they progress through the program. In my opinion, you do a sport to do it as well as you can. So in those first couple of years, you are engaging them through fun games or teaching them how to move, and that's what they concentrate on, and that's what they do really well. And then perhaps as 15 or 16-year-olds, they're learning to be competitive, but still there's maybe it's not as fast from A to B. It's different things that can be competitive. And then I think a good program in my eyes, and lots of people might have a different opinion, then in those latter years, you prepare them for rowing as fast as they can from A to B, or you prepare them for, as they prepare for university or integration into a senior squad of a local club. It's sweep rowing, great, and you could do sweep rowing, or it's all about how hard you can row and how fast you can row, but that a program has structure and it progresses, and that you are falling in love rather than have fallen in love with the sport.
Awesome. Amy, what's your key message you're going to take to your new club to start?
I think, like I said, being from the low income household myself, it's always had to have been the motivation to prove that you can do something and that money isn't the factor, and doing everything you can in your power to prove that. And it's not a simple procedure, but at the same time, when I use the term simple, I think of the simplicity of rowing. I think about getting into a boat, going from front stops to back stops, and keep doing that. And I think taking the simplicity of rowing and putting a kid onto the water, into a boat, and say go forwards and backwards and take your oars in and out the water, it takes every other factor away. It takes away the cost of the kit. It takes away your British Rowing cost membership. You just basically stick to forwards and backwards motion, just a bit like what Deborah was saying, and just make them see how easy that is. And again, with that, the motivation comes with it.
Cool. Excellent. Kieran, you've got a minute. What are you taking with you?
If I was doing it, I'd run a similar program, but I'd perhaps play the longer game. I'd spend more time, say I was in the Academy Trust, with primary school kids. The big problem we have is them engaging in extracurricular. So I'd fix those problems whilst they're still young and impressionable. And then hopefully all that work I've done a long time ago helps me out when the program reaches maturity.
Cool, excellent. Well, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us. That's our time done now, I think. No, I think it's been an excellent discussion to have. Something we were discussing previously was just the dynamic of getting everyone together over these 2 webinars to have these discussions has been, I think, really useful. And there is possibility that if people are interested, we could continue this discussion and have a bit of a forum. We could go on to Zoom or Google Hangouts and invite people from more clubs to come and talk to us and share their experiences, be that you've got a diversity and inclusion project in your club, or you'd like to start one and you don't quite have the support, you don't know what to do. There are obviously people out here in the clubs who've got experience of doing this. So if there's appetite for that to continue the discussion further, what we're going to do, there's going to be a feedback email going out after the webinar. So in there's going to be a Google form to register interest. So if you stick your email in there and let us know that you're interested, we'll keep an eye on that. And if we get enough respondents, then we'll be in contact and we'll try and host a bit of a forum and continue this discussion, which I think will be really, really useful. So thank you, everyone. I think we're going to hand over to Paul, who's going to wrap us up for the evening.
I am. Thank you very much. Especially thank you to Kieran, Dev and Amy. Some very thought-provoking things that you put in there, especially from all aspects, from the juniors, from adults and from coaching. I must admit, my first experience of coaching or being coached was being shouted at from the bank. Must have done something to me. I'm still here, but thank you very much indeed for your time. It was very interesting. And as Ashley says, if you've got any questions, please put them into the feedback form that we get, that you'll receive. And I'd just like to say good night and everybody stay safe. And thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.